All Things Black and Beautiful, as I mentioned earlier, is a social enterprise. And we are leveling the playing field for Black business owners. What does that mean? In order to level the playing field, we try to address critical issues that affect Black businesses today and prevent us from scaling and establishing our economic presence. And in All Things Black and Beautiful, we tackle three aspects. The first is market access. So we help Black business owners to get access to key markets through exhibitions, trade shows, and retail distribution. The second thing we do is to collaborate together. So we look for innovative ways to network, build community and partnerships to help us to establish our presence. And then the third part of what we do is education. So through webinars like this, courses and thought leadership, we educate the Black business community. And that's what we're all about. That's why we're here today. So in the next 15 minutes or so, we'll be talking about financial literacy. And why is this important? Financial literacy is not just important for us, but in order to build generational wealth, we also have to think about how we pass that information on to our children to help them to establish themselves for growth and success. To introduce our speaker today, we have amongst us Kimberly Selfridge. Kimberly is a financial educator. She is a financial expert. She is a serial entrepreneur. She has multiple businesses. She started her first business in her sophomore year in university. And, she's one person I have so much respect for because of the breadth of knowledge she has. I remember meeting her up for lunch one day, and she was telling me how her mom basically packed her with all this financial information. And that's one of the things that inspired her to start the Kids Money Project. Okay, so I would like to introduce Kimberly. Kim, please go ahead and let's hear from you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much for inviting me back, and absolutely love your platform, and I love to be able to share some of my knowledge on your platform with these wonderful women and gentlemen. And so yeah, honestly, I will just go ahead and start sharing my presentation here. Hopefully everybody can see that. But again, yeah, so I am really all about encouraging parents and everything to talk to their kids about money. Like Tolu said, I was very fortunate to have a mother that talked to me about money growing up. It was one of those things that I did not realize just what an amazing gift my mother had given me until a little bit later. Now, unfortunately, I did lose my mother a little early, but because she gave me this knowledge when she did, it has absolutely made my life so much easier, a lot less stressful. We know that money is one of the most stressful things in our lives. And so being able to have this knowledge and be able to use it throughout my life is so important, which is what led me to starting the Kids Money Project. So today I'm going to kind of do a real broad kind of overview of, I called it the who, what, when, where, why, and how that we do this. Honestly, most of these topics that we cover could be a topic in and of themselves. And it is something that we do a lot with the Kids Money Project and also through my other company. So I'll give you a little bit of insight on me. Again, my name is Kimberly Selfridge. I am a financial services professional and financial educator. I am with Five Rings Financial, and then I am the founder of the Kids Money Project. I have been in financial services for almost 30 years now, which was a little scary when I recently figured that out. I did not realize I was quite that old. But really, what we kind of focus on, financial education is our big thing. So we do financial education for parents. We do it for adults in general. We have a number of different platforms that we use for this. What I actually specialize in is kind of tax-free retirement, college funding. That's really my big one because I'm really about making sure that we can kind of keep down this college debt problem that we seem to have in this country and other countries. We do living benefits, annuities, and indexed accounts, which I'm not going to get into any of that. That's not why we're here today. But my why is why I do these events. So after college, I did realize that I kind of viewed money and I had a different mindset about money than most of my friends. And this was not something that I had learned in school. This was something that I realized had come through essentially my entire childhood. You know, my mother did not sit me down at the kitchen table, crack open a book, and teach me about finances. But through all of our experiences in growing up, and whether it was going to the grocery store, whether it was buying a car, paying bills, all of these things, she showed me what she was doing. She told me why she was doing it, how she was doing it. And so by the time I got out into the real world, you know, I knew how to do these things, and I wasn't fearful for any of these. So, you know, and then of course during college, I watched a lot of my friends just bury themselves in student loan debt. And because the lack of financial education that exists, when kids are getting to college, they're not understanding when they're taking out these loans what they are really doing. And they get tens and even hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt sometime, which can be very, very difficult to come back out of. But because I understood these concepts, I was able to kind of not make some of these bigger mistakes. Now, even with financial education, we're human, we will make mistakes. But the great thing is we have a way of working out of them and make fewer of them, and so they're easier to come out of. So I am going to kind of just jump right into the presentation. So the who should talk to kids about money. So we know in our schools, they teach reading, writing, math, history, sciences, all these kind of things. But one thing that is very much lacking in our school systems is any kind of financial education. Now, some of that is starting to change. Some districts are starting to put in some extracurricular classes and things like that, but they're not mandatory. And they certainly do not take the education as far as it would need to go. So that's going to put mom and dad in the financial seat, which honestly, that's the best person to, or best people to actually have these conversations. And so because money is, you know, it's not the most important thing in life, but it is something that is very important in our life because it pays for those things that we do need. So transportation, clothing, food, shelter, all these things do require money. So because of that, money is actually very important to us. So here are a lot of the reasons that parents give for not talking to their kids about money. So we know that chances are more than likely you were never talked to about money growing up. It's always been kind of a taboo conversation. And so, you know, we just did not talk about it. It's not talked about in school. It's not talked about at home. So by the time you get there, get out into the real world, now it's just all about trying to figure it out and survive. And so, and a lot of times, parents are worried. They know they have made financial mistakes, and so they're worried about teaching their kids the wrong things. And so they, instead of talking to them, they don't talk to them at all. So, and then maybe they're not sure how to actually talk to them about money. They're not sure where to start or when to do it. It can be a difficult topic to talk about. They think, well, my kids are not even listening. Why would I bother? And then a lot of times they think that, oh, well, I'll wait until they're a little bit older. Well, I'll show you here in just a little bit. You know, putting it off could actually lead to a lot more issues because, believe it or not, kids understand money a lot earlier than you might think. So, and then this is kind of continuing why parents, as I mentioned, this was not something I sat down at a kitchen table and learned. My mother used daily experiences to actually teach me about money. So this is a day in, day out. And that's why schools are never going to be able to teach it in the way it would need to be taught. This is something that when you go to the grocery store, that can be a learning experience, whether just talking about your day, paying bills, all of these things are ways to be able to teach your kids about money. And then, you know, we know that these conversations, it's not a one-time conversation. It is something that should go on. When you start young, you build a foundation and then you keep adding on to it. And then we also have to remember our kids are watching. Now, sometimes we don't realize just how much they're seeing, but they see a lot more than we realize at times. But what sometimes they don't see is the entire process. They see part of it, but not all of it, which can actually lead to a lot of confusion for them. So that's why parents are kind of put into the driver's seat on this, because they have the ability to not only explain why they're doing it, but show them how they're doing it, when they're doing it, why they're doing it. And so, and then they can just keep it going throughout their childhood, because we know that kids learn by repetition. So, what should be discussed? Well, the short answer is everything. Now, what is everything, right? So, a lot of parents will actually cover the basics when their kids are growing up. So, kind of earning money, spending money, saving, giving. They'll hit a lot of those topics, and they usually cover those pretty well. And why those are very important. And yes, absolutely need to be discussed. One of the things, we need to take it to the next step further. So we need to talk about those things that maybe don't seem as much fun, but are equally as important. Things like insurance, taxes, mortgages, renting, investing, credit, compound interest, budgeting, and just a mindset. Your mindset can actually be so important when it comes to money. And so being able to give our children a good mindset around money and give them a healthy relationship with money is vital to their success in life. And then money is nothing but a tool. Money can actually get a pretty bad rap. We've probably all heard the sayings, money is the root of all evil and all this kind of stuff. And that is absolutely not true. While yes, people can do some bad things with money, it was not the money that did it. It was the people that did it. And just like money can do some bad things, people with money can do some really great things. Think about all the charities and things like that that are out there. So money is just a tool. It is nothing more and it's nothing less. So, as I mentioned before, stress is one of those big issues. And so being able to give a financial education to our kids can eliminate that stress from their life. I'm not sure about in other countries, but I can tell you in the United States, the number one cause for divorce and for other areas is stress, and it's actually due to money issues. So again, while we're not talking about money being the most important thing in life, it does rank up there about like oxygen. We do need it. We need it to be able to survive. And so the better we understand it, the better we can grow it, the better we can protect it, manage it, and that just leads to a better life. So, there are plenty of other things that are stressful in life. So let's try to take money out of that equation. So when should we talk to our kids about money? Well, again, as I mentioned, throughout their entire childhood. So if you haven't actually started talking to your kids, now is the time to do it. Now, don't worry if you haven't started talking to them, plenty of time to play catch up and everything like that. But just so you know, there was a University of Cambridge study done a while back that showed that kids by the age of 3 can actually understand basic money concepts. So that's by age 3. But more importantly, by age 7, many of their money habits have actually already been set. And so if we are not having these conversations, if we're not talking to them about money, then they may be developing some bad habits. Even if mom and dad have good habits around money, remember I mentioned they can't necessarily see all of what's going on. They may see part of the transaction, but not all of the transaction. And that can be understood by them. And so they may develop a bad habit, even though you were showing a good habit. So that's where the conversation is so important. And then unfortunately, not talking about money can actually lead to some very disastrous consequences. So some of these things can be the kids don't actually understand the value of money. We see this a lot when kids are graduating high school and taking out student loans to go to college or some sort of higher education. They actually do not understand what they are doing when they are taking out those larger amounts of money. They honestly feel that when they get this job right out of college, they'll be able to pay these things back in 3 to 5 years, maybe. And unfortunately, reality is that is not even close. There, as you'll see actually a little bit later, I think there's a slide that tells you it's closer to 21 years that it takes to pay back a bachelor's degree, and closer to 45 years for any kind of an advanced degree, and sometimes not even at all. We have doctors in this country that can't even pay their minimum payments on their student loans. And so that is why having that knowledge about money so that we can maybe eliminate some of that stress, and getting them into a hole before they really even get started in life is so good. And then if we do this, they can actually develop a fear for money. And we don't want them scared of money. Money is something that we do have to use, and not understanding how it works can lead to a fear. So again, knowledge is power in this particular area. And then, we don't want them to learn unhealthy money habits. We want them to have very healthy money habits growing up, because that will just lead to a much happier life. I already talked about student loan debt. Credit card debt is the same thing. And then we want them to understand concepts about compounding interest. Now, compounding interest is one of those areas. Most adults have heard of compounding interest, but a lot of times they don't actually understand what it is. And in very simple terms, compounding interest is interest on interest. So when you have money in an account and it's earning interest, if it is a compounding type account, when your interest keeps growing, you're actually able to grow it on the interest again as well. And so instead of a simple interest account where it just grows on that money you put in, compounding can create an effect where over time, exponentially, your money can really start growing. Now, compounding interest can work in two different ways. It can work for you and it can work against you. And again, that's why it's important to understand that concept. Albert Einstein actually said, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it, which is so very, very true, and something to very much keep in mind. Credit cards are one of those ways that we end up paying it a lot. So I wanted to put this slide in real quick, just so you can actually see how compounding interest can work on actually a relatively small amount of money. So if you took $150 and put that in every month, so over, I took about a 40 to a 42 year time frame, so you could kind of look. But if you're averaging a 10% annual return on that, if you look at these numbers, at 42 years, you're actually over $1 million. And 10% is actually a very doable interest rate. In the United States, our markets average that fairly easily over a long period of time. Obviously, from year to year, they fluctuate a great deal. But over time, if you take a long period of time, that's about what they average. Different other investments can average a little more, and some can average a little less. But you can see a very small amount of money, $150. That's not an extreme amount of money. But as long as you start early, that's the key when it comes to compounding interest, is starting early. So if you look at that, just kind of keep that in mind. You don't have to invest large amounts of money to actually make a lot of money. So where should we talk to our kids about money? Well, a little bit about like, what should we talk to them about? Really everywhere. They're teaching lessons everywhere in the world. So at home, grocery store, I've mentioned before, the malls, grandparents' houses, cars, bedtime, the dinner table, even on vacation, believe it or not. Vacation's an area where a lot of times we tend to be a little freer with our money, but explaining what that can be and how you can do that. A lot of it comes down to budgets and things like this. And so, there are lessons all around us. So, there's not necessarily an exact time or place or anything like that. It can literally be anywhere. And then why should we talk to our kids? Well, we've obviously covered a lot of the why already in some of what we've talked about, but I'll mention these four specifically because they can have such an effect on where we are with our kids. So credit card debt. Credit card debt, as adults, chances are we may be familiar with it. We may be carrying it. We may have carried it once before in our life. But credit cards can be something that they're very easy to sometimes get out of control. And if we do not teach our kids how to use credit cards and how to manage their money, again, it's another area where they'll get in trouble with money. It very much seems to happen when they go off to school. While they're taking out student loans, if they're not enough, very often they will start running up that credit card debt. So not only do they have tens of thousands in student loan debt, but they may run up a $10,000 credit card bill at the same time. And as we know, credit card interest is very high, very, very high. Student loans, we've kind of talked about already. living beyond your means. This is an area that unfortunately television today can actually really perpetuate this with kids because they see people living in these really grand ways, all these nice cars, places they're going, boats, and all this kind of stuff. And of course, who wouldn't want all of that stuff? And but they don't talk about what actually goes into it, and that's where the parents need to kind of step in and explain what it means to actually live beyond your means and what happens when you don't. Again, that's what kind of leads to stress at that point. When you start living beyond your means, it can really start playing havoc on your life. It's one of the leading causes of divorce in the United States. 90% of Americans say that money impacts their stress level. And then 43% of women actually worry about money daily. Now, again, I've mentioned we got enough stuff to worry about. If we're compounding that with money, it's just that much harder and it's physically hard on us. So, just living beyond your means a little bit more, obviously, it's spending more money than you're bringing in. But not, it also means not paying yourself first. Very typically, a lot of people will, they have what they're making and then they pay out all their bills first. And what they have left at the end, if anything, is what they save. And the problem is you need to be doing that exactly the opposite. And again, let's talk to our kids about starting like this and not getting into the bad habit of paying bills first. Pay yourself first, and then you live on what you have left from that. And so you're probably, depending on if you're teaching your kids, then you can kind of start them out in a good place and show them how to do that first. But a lot of parents and stuff may have to adjust how they're living. They may need to cut a couple of things out, things like that, make some adjustments. Charging purchases on credit, that's something. And again, there's nothing evil about credit cards, but if you misuse credit cards, if you abuse them a little bit, then they can actually come back and hurt us greatly on that interest side. And especially like making minimum payments on your credit cards. I know particularly in the United States, I'm not sure about other places, but they are required to actually put on your form, if you pay just the minimum payment, how long it would take you. If you didn't add anything additional, they'll tell you how long and how much you will actually spend at that current interest rate. And it's a little scary because it can take you somewhere upwards of 30 and even 40 years, not adding any additional money. And then it'll also show you just paying a little bit more. And it's usually around a 3-year period of time, what it will change, just paying a little bit more. So that's one thing that it's important to let our kids know, that when they are using credit cards, use them, but pay them off every month. And then living paycheck to paycheck, obviously something that can be extremely stressful. Credit card debt, we've covered a little bit. Mentioned they are not evil, but they do really show some bad habits. So if we're constantly using them when we don't have money in our account, and we don't have them to pay off, we're using compounding interest, but we're using it against us at this point. So, and a lot of times we take out cards for a certain reason. Maybe there was an intro offer, but remember, those never last. And that's something, when your child gets to college age, they're going to receive a lot of credit card offers, and all of them will have these intro, 0% for 6 months or a year or something like that. But those all go away. And if we get used to that, it can lead to a problem later. And then student loans. This is a big area that I talk about simply because it is such an epidemic problem in this country. But so you can kind of see here that the average federal student loan balance is somewhere around almost $38,000. Private is closer to about 45 or 40,000. But where this can actually really change things. So let's take your child who is getting to college age. They start taking out student loans, and let's say they take out 35,000 in student loans by the time they graduate. Now they have to start paying those off. Well, while they're paying those off, chances are there's other things they're not doing, like starting to put money towards their retirement. Now, everybody thinks, well, they've got plenty of time. They're in their 20s. They're not going to be retiring until they're probably in their 60s or something like that. So there's plenty of time, right? Well, while there is time, remember what we talked about on compounding interest. When you start taking away that time, the more time you lose, the more money you have to actually put away in order to get that same response. So where earlier I showed you where in 42 years, $150 could equal up to $1 million at a very reasonable interest rate of 10%. But if you take 20 years off of that, that will change that. I don't remember exactly what it was at 20 years, but I can tell you it was probably around $300,000 or $400,000 and very far off of $1 million. There have been studies that have shown that children that graduate with 35,000 in student debt, for what it takes them to pay off that debt at the age 65, when they may be wanting to retire, they actually have 350,000 less saved at that time. So that is a huge difference, only because that first part of it, maybe it was 10 years, maybe it was 21 years, like we mentioned, they are paying off that student loan debt and not putting towards something else. And maybe we'll have to make much larger payments later. So, and then of course, as we know, some are taking out much more in student loans, even hundreds of thousands. As you see here, I mentioned earlier that a bachelor's degree is on average taking 21 years to repay. Professional degrees are 45 years and sometimes not even at all. The Department of Education actually claims about 10 years is what you should be pushing for. Now, I am going to stress one thing to the parents here. So parents oftentimes really want to put money away for their child's education, which I can absolutely think is wonderful. I was fortunate. My mother helped me with my college education and put money away for me. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that. And I love that. However, I will say one thing here. Do not jeopardize your retirement to pay for college education. Now, the reason I say that is a lot of parents will stop putting money towards their retirement to put into a college fund of some sort for their child, which is very admirable. And they'll do that because the child's education will come up before their retirement. Now, the problem with that is you're losing that time factor again, but nobody will let you borrow money to retire. They're just not going to do it. You're not going to be working. They will not let you borrow money. Your child will have the ability to borrow money for their education. Now, while I spend a lot of time showing kids and parents how not to have children borrow money for their retirement, it is possible to do. So parents, don't jeopardize your retirement for their education. If you can do both, fantastic. And as I showed you, you don't necessarily have to do a lot of money for their education. You can help. They can actually, there's a lot of things that they can do for themselves that will help with a college education, but just don't jeopardize yourself. And that's just something I always tell parents, because I love that parents want to help their kids, but just don't jeopardize your future for that. And just a little bit more about student loans. Planning ahead is one of the most vital things. There are a lot of things that can be done. One thing that kids, this is where kids are a big part of the conversation. We often let them kind of dictate a lot of what they're doing in college, where they're wanting to go to college, what they're wanting to do. Now, this is scientific. This is actually true. The cerebral cortex is actually what controls our reasoning, our emotion, our thoughts, memory, language, and our consciousness. And it's kind of right up here in the top of our brain. However, it is also one of the last parts of our brain to develop and is often not developed until closer to about 24, 25, 26. So it's one of those very last areas. Now, remember I talked about reasoning centers. So oftentimes they have a hard time reasoning. You know, they see a school and they want to go there because their best friend is going there. It's near the beach. Maybe it's a ski resort, something like that. They oftentimes pick schools for the wrong reasons and not for why they actually want to attend that school. And so this is where parents are going to need to kind of come in and help kids understand, particularly that financial value to it. A lot of kids do not know what they want to do when they're going to school. And if they're picking a large private school that may be $50,000, $60,000 a year. And maybe they don't have, I mean, obviously you can apply for financial aid and things, but you're looking at being 100,000 plus in student loan debt by the time they come to the end of it. And maybe they're not even going to be able to get the degree that they will eventually want, or they stretch it out because they don't have the degree. They end up switching schools, and maybe they end up going to school for 5 or 6 years, again, drawing out more of those payments. So this is where you can really be a big influence in helping your child um, in their college planning or higher education planning. I'm a big believer that college is not necessarily for everybody, but higher form of education of some sort is absolutely necessary. A high school degree is good, but it is only going to take you so far. A higher form of education is vital in today's world. And so how do we talk to our kids about money? So this one I have kind of broken down to a number of things where we're going to kind of give you a roadmap of kind of the when and how to talk. So really how just decide that to start these conversations, however works best for your family, whether it's sitting down at the kitchen table, all like we mentioned a number of ways to have these conversations. In the car, road trips are always a good place. You know, you're kind of stuck, you're confined in one area. It's a great time to start. But life experiences are one of those areas. There's always a teaching lesson in there somewhere. And then you want to keep these conversations age appropriate. So talking to a 3-year-old about a mortgage is probably not going to do them any good. But that is why we are going to break it down all the way into the different age groups. So birth to about 2 years. So this one is actually going to be a little more about you. So this is where you need to kind of look at yourself a little bit. What kind of habits are you modeling for your child? We need to be very careful of our language at times. A lot of times we can say things and we don't necessarily mean them. Now our kids oftentimes will not understand them. Like here in the United States, we just went through tax time. In fact, our tax date was yesterday. And so a very common thing is, you know, people can be like, oh, I hate taxes. I hate tax time. You know, that's a real common one. Or, you know, a lot of times maybe our kids were in the grocery store and they want something, you know, they always want something. And it's really easy to say, I don't have money for that or something like that. These are all negative connotations. And again, we don't think of them of actually hurting, but with just a little bit of tweaking of that language, it can turn into something a lot better. So instead of, I don't have enough money for that, we can say something like, you know, that's not actually in the budget. You know, we came here to buy this, and this is what we're going to buy. If we want to look at this, we need to put it in the budget. You know, just a little tweak like that. You don't want to give in. Obviously, that starts a whole other issue right there. And I am sure every parent on here can probably understand that well. But you know, it's all about kind of teaching them as you go. And again, at this early age, look at what your mindset is. Is it a fixed mindset? Is it a growth mindset? If you're not familiar with those, you can actually Google them. Don't really have enough time to go completely into all of these. But essentially a fixed mindset is you think everything, well, it's actually easier to do a growth mindset. A growth mindset, you have a very abundance type mindset. So you don't think you're limited by anything. People with a fixed mindset think there's usually just so much and that it gets divvied out, and how it gets divvied out is not necessarily in their control. Where a growth mindset feels that there is plenty for everybody, and what they do controls what they have. And so it can be a real game changer in your life and in your child's life if you're kind of presenting them with more of a growth mindset. And then obviously at this point for your kids, as they're kind of approaching 2, this is a good time to kind of start them on their numbers, start counting, things like that. Age 3 to 5, I say earn money. That's in relative perspective here. So the reason I say you want them to start earning money at an earlier age is because we can't really explain or have them understand money management until they have money of their own. So kids will spend your money much differently than they will spend their own money. So when I say have them earn their own money, obviously they're very young here. So it may be small chores around the house, making sure their room is picked up, all the toys, that their shoes are where they're supposed to be, that they're putting their clothes in the hamper, or they're, that's up to you how you put the different things, but have them doing certain things to earn at least a little bit of money that's theirs, that they can choose what to do with it, how to do with it. Then you can have them actually start saving money. I am a big believer, and at this early age, spending, saving, and giving are really your three big ones. I like to add a fourth a little bit later, probably about the next one, starting at around 6. That's also investing. And the reason I do that is a very important part, and they need to understand what that is. At this age, spending is pretty obvious is what they're going to spend. Saving is almost more like a long-term spending goal. So it's more about them having a toy or something like that that they're earning their money to pay for. So it is spending, but it's on a long term. It may be maybe something as short as a month or 2 or 3 months, or maybe something as long as a year, depending on what it is. We talked about sharing, having them understand that should be part of their money lessons is sharing. And then a delayed gratification, that's an important one, because kids are very much, right now, everything is, I want it now. Our television, commercials, TV shows, all of this stuff help promote that instantaneous. We live in a very instantaneous world. And so helping them understand a delayed gratification and being able to save for something over a period of time will help them understand what needs to be done as they're getting older. Remember, we're setting a foundation. So we're starting with smaller things, but as they get older, all of these things will get a little bit bigger. The items they want get a little more expensive. And so we're building that foundation early. So some of the activities you can do at this age, coin games are great. Just make sure they are old enough. 3 to 5, you're usually safe, but kids do a lot of times like to put things in their mouth. So make sure you're watching, make sure they're not putting coins in their mouth and swallowing them. But coin games are a great way. They can start counting really well that way. They can recognize the coins. You can play store or restaurant at your own house. Help you flip coupons and things like that. Help them understand saving money. Grocery stores, some of them had done this before, but thanks to COVID, it's a little easier. Most grocery stores a lot of times have where you can shop online. Now, whether you actually do the shop online or you're just planning out your meals or something, you can see what's on sale that week and do that together. Have them help you do that. In fact, one of the things we have in our deal is having your child actually do that for the entire week. Now, I put a few rules on there, otherwise you're going to be eating a lot of hot dogs and spaghetti, but it can be a really great lesson to have them do for the week and have them plan out meals and understand the money that goes into it. Give them a budget that they have to stay within. 6 to 10, you're really kind of learning how to spend money at this point. So, it's important they understand that money it it doesn't grow on trees. You do have to earn it. There is a way for it to come in. So, and that money is directly tied to purchasing items. So, great time to start understanding price differences, kind of large versus small, a small toy versus a house. This is a fun age to start asking kids, and we get funny answers, which is why it's fun, but you ask them how much a car costs or how much a house costs. You can get some pretty crazy answers. I mean, you might get $500 or you can get 500 billion, trillion, zillion dollars. So it's always fun. But this is the time where you're going to start distinguishing between these differences. Around 8 years old is a good time to introduce them to budgeting. Now, again, their budget's going to look a little different from yours. It's going to be very small. But again, you start small and you start adding to it as they get older. As they hit those kind of preteen years, they're going to start wanting to buy more items themselves that maybe mom and dad are like, you're going to have to save your own money for. I remember my mother when I had a sweatshirt that I was dying to buy, and she was buying me back to school clothes. And she was not a particular fan. It didn't say anything bad or anything, but she just wasn't a fan of it. And she said, you know what? I'm not going to buy it for you, but if you want it, save your own money and buy it yourself. I wanted it bad enough that I saved my own money. It was, I will fully admit now, it was far more expensive than I should have been spending on a sweatshirt at that time, but I did wear the life out of that sweatshirt, I will say. Probably because I spent my own money on it. Again, another good thing at this age is needs versus wants. And sometimes even adults can have a little issue with the needs versus wants. One game that I love playing with kids at this age is just point to things around your house and ask your child if it's a need or a want. You know, a picture on a wall, the television set, the car in the garage, the bed in the bedroom. You know, are these needs or wants? And then another good thing to kind of help decipher between is letting them know the difference between, obviously you can have a car that's, you know, a couple $1,000 car or a $200,000 car. Now, nobody needs a $200,000 car. Nobody needs a $200 pair of blue jeans. However, there's actually nothing wrong with these things. The only time that there is something wrong with these things is if they interfere with your life. If you cannot afford that item, then no, you should not be buying this item. If they are, one of the studies that I read a while back that I found very interesting is in the United States, non-essential items, we're spending about $18,000 a year on non-essential items. Now that's a lot of money. It's about $1,500 a month, $50 a day when you break it all the way down. Now, I'm not one of these that's going to tell you you should not have any non-essential items. Like those are kind of the fun things in life. However, people are spending that kind of money and neglecting other items in their life. They're not paying for life insurance. They're not putting money away for their retirement. They're neglecting things that are more important than some of these items. And just pulling back on some of those non-essential items, they would be able to afford these things. So that's what makes the difference on whether or not you buy the $9,000 car or the $90,000 car. Again, nothing wrong with the expensive car as long as it fits in your budget and you're not neglecting something that you should be purchasing. Good time for short and long-term goals. Like we mentioned before, long-term goals they're going to be very based on spending at this age. Compounding interest we've talked about. Quality versus quantity. This is a great time, particularly a grocery store where you might find a lot of bulk items. You know, explain to your child maybe why you bought the name brand that there were 8 in the box versus the non-name brand that was the same price or maybe even cheaper that had 20 in the box. You know, explain what the difference is, or maybe why you bought the one that was 20 and not the one that was 8. You know, they need to understand the quality versus quantity. You know, name brands are name brands for a reason. Does it mean you need to buy them? Absolutely not. That it kind of depends. A lot of times those are your own preference areas. And so that's a great time to start introducing that to your child. This is also a great time to include them in the financial conversations. Have them part of the budgets planning for the household. Let them know. Kids need to understand that the lights in the house cost money. The water coming out of the faucet costs money. Kids do not automatically know these things, usually until we start yelling at them to shut the front door and stop air conditioning the outside. I grew up in Texas, so you know that was a big one. But you know, it's important that they understand what actually costs money, and that it's not a given that they understand these things. They're not born understanding. Sorry, my mouth is getting dry. Age 11 to 13, this is where we kind of start introducing consequences. So credit, you know, that's an area where we talked about that has a lot of consequences to it. Sorry, I've got something stuck in my throat all of a sudden. But talking about debt, credit cards and bringing in that debt part can be a real problem. So you're kind of expanding the budget at this point. Identity theft, believe it or not, they need to understand to be careful with their information. We understand that if you've ever been a victim of identity theft, it can be a real pain. And they need to understand that holding on to their information and not giving it out, kids like to share. And while that can be a great thing with their snacks and things like that, not so much with other parts of their financial portfolio and stuff. And by the time they're getting this stage, they're getting more involved in the money. They actually see the power of money, and they're starting to want things. So it's a good time to bring that part up. And then advertising. I've mentioned it before that television can be a hard area because they are constantly bombarding our kids, particularly around Christmas and things like that, about things that they want. So good time to start having this and expand that family conversation. Set more of those long-term goals. This is a good time to start talking about, in the United States, our children can get a driver's license at 16 in most states. But this can be a time that you maybe start having the car conversation. Are they going to get a car? Do they even want a car? Who's going to pay for the car? Are you going to split the cost of the car? Who's going to pay the insurance and the taxes on the car? Start having these conversations. If they're going to be buying it, they can start saving for it now. But it's good that they just have this information and know. 13 to 15, this is a good part where they kind of start understanding building wealth. So earned income versus passive income. It's a good time to introduce that. Earned income, they can kind of understand. They've been doing it for a little while now. In fact, they may even be starting to work a little bit more outside their home, not necessarily driving to places, but maybe they're doing things for neighbors, other family members and things like that. I had a godson that started picking up people's backyards from their dogs and actually made a very good little income from it, that he started saving money left and right because it was a job that not a lot of people wanted to do, and he found a little niche. And so at 12 years old, he was cleaning up people's backyards. Good time to actually start introducing investing. So have them understand that putting their money away and having it work for them, where they're not necessarily working just for their money, but there is a passive income money. Have your money working for you. Good thing, or have it working for you while you're sleeping. That's one of those topics that you can always be kind of making money. Insurance, again, if they are looking at having a car, they need to know that they're going to have to be required to have insurance on that car, and it is not cheap, especially for a 16-year-old. And then loans, a good time to start introducing those. So again, keeping part of that family conversation, walking or starting to work more outside the home, but continue goal setting, both long and short term. And then you can practice or even actually do some real investing with money. There's a lot of platforms out there where you can do that. Just be a little careful and do your research. 16 to 18, kind of introducing them to the real world. So you're bringing in taxes. They may have a paycheck where FICA is starting to take some of their money. Understanding good versus bad debt. Credit scores. This is something that's going to come up for them here fairly soon when they get out on their own. And there's ways that you can actually help them understand or how to build their credit, rent, mortgages, and not living beyond their means. Again, that's something you started earlier, but it's getting more serious at this point. And then now that they're adult, as we know, our job as a parent is never over. Just make sure that you're there for them to be able to, ask questions. Let them know that they're there, especially when some of these bigger expenses in their life come up. So college, buying their first car on their own, putting a down payment on a house for the first time. So, they're starting to make very big money purchases that can actually really affect their livelihood. So in summary, just some facts about wealth. 74% of millennials believe that millionaires inherited their wealth, while 52% of baby boomers believe the same thing. The truth is actually 21% of millionaires received some kind of inheritance at all. Just 16% inherited more than $100,000, and only 3% received an inheritance over $1 million. So there was a study that found that 70% of well-to-do families lose their wealth in the second generation, and by the third, 90%. The entire reason for this is a lack of financial education. Whether you have money or you don't, if you do not understand how to manage it, it will be gone. It doesn't matter if you make 30,000 or 300,000. If you don't know how to manage your money, it will be gone. You might have fancier toys if you make more money, but it will still be gone. Creating generational wealth. Tulu actually mentioned this earlier. Essentially, generational wealth is just passing down assets from one generation to the next. So that, you know, it can include things like cash investments, stocks, and all this real estate. But most parents would like to leave something for their kids. But if your kids are not financially capable of understanding what that is, they will more than likely lose it, and they'll probably do it relatively quick. Most lottery winners lose that money within the first 2 to 3 years. I've actually seen this up close and personal with one of my clients. So financial literacy is literally the gift that keeps on gifting. So it can help with stress levels. It can create a much healthier living lifestyle. It's just, this is why it is so important that we have these conversations with our kids. Now, I know that most of what we talked about today was on a very general like I said, each one of these topics could be a topic in and of itself, and it is what we do. So I just wanted to give everybody kind of that roadmap, particularly there at the end of those ages of when you start talking to kids and everything. But yeah, I mean, there's so much more information. You know, this is kind of the end of my official presentation or anything, but I am happy to answer questions. But follow us on social media and stuff like that. And then obviously we do free events and things like that. So you're obviously welcome to join us there. And there we pick one topic each month and kind of cover it. So, but yeah, that is my presentation.